He'd sent her a long, threatening message. She was crying so much that she couldn't even tell me what the message said. So I grabbed her cell phone and read, "Dear stupid Carla, I'm missing you a lot. You owe me. Do as you're told, sweetheart. Otherwise, this beautiful photo of you will be all over Facebook and your life will be ruined for good." At the end of the message, there was a photo of Carla improperly dressed, holding a bottle of beer. It must have been a photo that he'd taken of her without her realizing. What a disgusting human being he was. "I don't know what we can do, but I think we need to tell Dad," I told her. But this was totally out of the question for her. She thought that the only solution would be for her to take money from Dad without him noticing and give it to that freak. And by doing so, he would hopefully stop harassing and threatening her. And then her life wouldn't be ruined. It didn't sound right to me at all. Taking money from Dad without his permission was stealing. Neither Carla nor I have ever stolen before. Why would we have needed to? Eventually, Carla convinced me and told me that Dad would never notice that some money was missing. Even if it was a huge sum of money, he would still never notice because that's how much money he had. And that was exactly what we did. We snuck into Dad's room and searched everywhere, but we couldn't find anything. We were just about to give up when Carla found a box that was hidden in his closet and it had some money in it. "The rest of Dad's money must be in the bank," Carla said. I thought about it for a moment. If Dad had put the rest of his money in his bank account, then he would definitely notice the absence of the money that he kept in his closet. But if we failed to find any more money, my sister's life would be ruined. Carla took the money and hid it in her room. On that night, we all sat together for dinner. Dad looked at our faces, and he definitely noticed our anxiety and nervousness. Dad always knew us more than we knew ourselves. Despite that fact, he wasn't very good at bringing up difficult subjects. He cleared his throat, then said, "When your mom was still with us, she used to know when I was upset just by looking at my face. She used to then ask me, 'What is wrong?' And I wouldn't answer, but she always knew what was wrong with me without needing to ask. But I am not as smart as your mom was. It is true that I can also know when something is wrong, but I cannot tell what it is exactly." At that moment, I wanted to scream and tell him about everything that had happened, but the sad look on Carla's face stopped me in my tracks, and I couldn't say a word. I only wished that everything would work out okay and that the nightmare that we were living in would soon come to an end so that we could return to being a normal, happy family. We never said a word that night. We just smiled. There wasn't anything to say. The next day, Carla went to give the guy the money he asked for. He took the money, smiled, and went on his way. She came back home happy, as she thought that her ordeal had finally ended. But before she could even tell me what had happened, she received a new message with a new picture. Nevertheless, this time the guy threatened her again and said that if she did not bring him the same amount of money every single day, all of her photos would be uploaded to a fake Facebook account with her name. Not only that, but he also threatened that he wouldn't hesitate for a second to send all those photos of her to our dad as well. "Oh no, it is getting worse. We cannot provide him with that kind of money every single day. We barely were able to get him that money the first time," I said. I grabbed her phone and replied to his message telling him that we did not have enough money. He replied, "It might be true that you don't have enough money, but your father definitely has enough." That guy was planning on robbing my dad of his money from the get-go. I couldn't believe that my naive sister had genuinely thought that he loved her. I looked at my sister, only to see her running to check if there was any money left in the box she could give him to stop him from ruining her life. Surprisingly, the box was full of money once again. She didn't think twice and took the money the next day to give it to that despicable person who she once thought had loved her. What did I do? Well, I stayed up all night thinking. How could it be possible that our dad hadn't noticed that the box was empty when he came back home? Why had he filled it with more money? And what could we do to get out of this ordeal once and for all? Once again, I concluded that we should tell Dad, but Carla never accepted that solution, as she knew very well that Dad had repeatedly warned her before about dating that guy, and she'd never listened to him. The situation repeated itself time and time again, and every day the box would be refilled with money as if nothing had ever happened. Carla and I pretended that everything was fine, but in reality, we knew very well that we were in a vicious circle. We had absolutely no idea about how we could ever get rid of that massive burden. After a whole month, during which that guy consistently received a daily large sum of money from us, Dad came home unexpectedly one day looking upset, frowning, and holding his head in his hands. It looked like he was definitely going through a crisis. I approached him, put my hand on his shoulder, and whispered, "What's wrong, Dad?" And he immediately broke into tears. He said that there was something that he had to speak to us about. I was feeling really uneasy and had a strong feeling that what Dad was going through was somehow related to Carla and that freak she dated. And as you've probably noticed by now, my hunch is rarely wrong. Dad told us that his company had gone bankrupt and that he didn't have enough money to provide for us anymore. He told us that all the money that he hid in his room was stolen and that we no longer have anything left. He said our life would never be the same again unless we found the person who'd stolen our money, put him in prison, and got our money back. That was exactly the kind of thing I'd been scared about the whole time. Our life was ruined because of Carla and her selfishness. I had to tell Dad the truth. But to my surprise, the moment when I decided to open my mouth and confess everything, Carla jumped in and said, "I will tell him everything." Firstly, I never imagined that Carla could put herself in such a situation. And secondly, that she could be brave enough to confess. She might be selfish, but she was putting our family first for once. Carla told Dad the whole truth, every single detail of what had happened. But there was no reaction on Dad's face. I thought he'd explode with anger, or at least look surprised. I mean, he'd just discovered the colossal mistake we'd both made, but he didn't react. After my sister finished telling her story, Dad grabbed his phone and called a friend of his who was a police officer and said, "Yes, as I expected, you can go on and arrest him." Carla looked at me with a look of surprise all over her face, but I understood what had really happened. Dad laughed loudly and went outside. It wasn't until a few hours later that he came back home and started to explain to us what had actually happened. It turned out that when Carla started to date that questionable guy, our dad was very worried for her, and he entrusted his friend to track him down. And so my dad's friend discovered that the guy was a member of a gang which blackmailed girls. Dad tried many times to warn Carla, but she always thought that he was making up stories to keep her away from her boyfriend. So he decided to follow a different route to keep her safe. Dad told us that he never used to keep money at the house, but once he was suspicious of that guy, he'd put a box full of money in his cupboard and kept track of it daily. And since the first time that he noticed the box had less money than he'd originally put in it, he knew that the guy had fallen into the trap, as Dad knew that we would never steal. A month went by, and he finally decided to pretend that we were bankrupt so that we would tell him the whole story to give the police what they needed so they could arrest the guy for theft. Once again, Dad laughed and said, "The company that I manage would not go bankrupt because of a few missing dollars. The most important thing is that your future does not get ruined." There is no doubt that we had the best father in the world, and we did not even know it. That despicable person was sent to prison after being found guilty for extortion and stealing. And as for Carla, well, she became a totally new person after what she went through. Now she prefers spending time with me and Dad. and she's no longer that needy girl that she used to be. So that was my story about my sister's thief of a boyfriend and us almost losing all the money that we had. What about you? Have you ever been a victim of theft? Share your story with us, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.